I'm going to start this video off by saying thank you to my first gold level sponsor, Above Par Barbecue. They are located at 12967 Highway 51 in beautiful Tahlequah, Oklahoma. They are open Wednesday through Saturday, 10:30 until they sell out of meat. It's a short drive for a hole-in-one. I would also like to thank Dawn Childry for her donation as well. I think to understand why Mighty Oaks meant so much to me, you have to know just how far down I've gone, how long this trail has been in fighting PTSD, and where I've come from, where I am, and where I'm going. As Kaleo sang in 2015, the song Way Down We Go, stick around and you'll find out just how low, how far down my PTSD took me. While I'm doing that, watch Maurice Atkins cut and grind and extend this mini bike so that I have a little more room to move on. The beginning of the unraveling began in Afghanistan on 4 February 2002. That was my first deployment. I deployed with the 92nd Engineers out of Fort Stewart, Georgia. I won't go into what I saw on my first deployment, that's for another time, but I will say that it was more than some and less than many. It was after my return that I started having what I thought was chest pains. With a family history of heart issues, that's what I assumed it was. I'd gone into the Army with a very particular set of skills of being able to lay bricks really well. I was often tasked with doing little side projects for other members of my unit. It just seemed that I wasn't able to do it as well. I would always panic if things weren't done exactly right, or I didn't have the right things, or I'd show up and just get frustrated with something and I'd have to quit. I always managed to finish the project, but I just knew something wasn't right. I did have the benefit of being on active duty, so I could go to the hospital and get it checked out. They found that there was no heart issues, so I continued to deploy. The next deployment, Iraq, 4 April 2003. After that deployment, I still had more chest pains, but there was no time to figure it out. So I went on my last deployment to Iraq in late December 2004 and came back at the end of 2005. It seemed I was handling the deployments better this last time, but something major happened in my life that changed everything. I knew when I came home that I needed time to adjust, and my dad and my mother just got divorced. I knew he wanted to talk about the divorce and that he remarried shortly afterwards while I was still on deployment. I just couldn't deal with it, so I put it off until the next day. He was sandblasting in Savannah, so I put off dinner until the next day. When 5 o'clock came and went, I didn't think anything of it. When 6 o'clock came and went, I thought that's not like him, so I kept calling his phone over and over again. Finally, I got through. It was to the sandblasting assistant that he had. His assistant told me that he had sat down in a bucket and was not feeling well, so they called an ambulance and he was on the way to a local hospital. Knowing my dad and his heart issues, I thought this could be the last time that I ever see him. So I rushed down to the hospital looking for him. He didn't have any ID on him, so they had a hard time identifying him. But he had passed en route on the way to the hospital, and they did everything they could while they were there, but he just didn't make it. That is when the full meltdown began for me. I could not eat. I was panicked all the time. I couldn't stand to be around anyone or have anybody behind me or be in large crowds. I say I was panicked, but at the time I still thought it was heart issues, but it was anxiety, and it was really bad. I went to a local urgent care, and they prescribed me my first anti-anxiety medication. After 3 weeks, it still was not helping with the anxiety. I went to my Army primary care and he said, well, it should have already helped, so he put me on a different anti-anxiety medication. It was around this time that I was going to PCS from Georgia to Oklahoma, my new duty station. The new unit that I was going to was the one that relieved us on my last trip to Iraq. I started the process to be able to deploy one more time. When it came to medical, they saw that I was on anti-anxiety medication, so they sent me over to mental health to check that box. It turns out that mental health at that time was not going to sign off on me deploying. My new unit was not happy about that. I really couldn't care less at that point, and I went back to mental health and they cycled me on and off a bunch of different meds and prescribed sleep aids. One of them was Ambien, and that's when it went really interesting. The first night on Ambien was not nearly as rowdy as the second one, but I did try to fight my door to my closet, and I also wanted to eat a bunch of butter for some reason. This is the first deep valley that I went through in my PTSD journey. On the second night, I got really hot and thought it'd be a good idea to streak through the neighborhood. Then I went and laid down in my bed, took the cord to the lamp that was beside it, and started wrapping around my neck trying to strangle myself. And then once my wife untangled that, I looked down beside the bed to grab a knife and tried to stab myself. Now, I don't remember most of this, but my wife definitely did. Since I wasn't going to be able to deploy, my psychologist decided to send me to the PTSD Center in Palo Alto, California. There were several things that I got out of that. One was I met a lot of really good men who were struggling with the same thing that I was. The second thing was they bumped my anti-anxiety medicine up like 3 times as much. The third thing that I got out of it was a lot of tools to use for coping with PTSD. All the therapies and all the different types of treatment that there is. Shortly after my return from Palo Alto, my wife collapsed for no reason whatsoever. We went to the Army hospital and they transferred her to the county hospital, then on to Integris Baptist. She has a rare heart-lung condition called PAH, a disease that is life-threatening and whose end state is a heart-lung transplant. She offered me the out, but I could not do it. I signed up for better or worst, and here we were at one of the worst. I believed that I could not do it and be the man that I thought I was, in my head. Despite all the help that Palo Alto tried to give me, I still came home and struggled to curb my fears of persons behind me with the formations and the transitioning off the anxiety meds to another. The taper down of all these created such misery and withdrawals and was painful. And eventually I was med boarded out. The first thing that I did was try to get a job on post. I got one with a civilian maintenance company. They were good to me. They were so understanding when they didn't have to be. I was a part of the shingle crew. It was not long before I had to quit. I kept having this overwhelming urge to kick one of the guys off of the roof. Mind you, he was not the issue. I was. I fought it for 2 weeks, and I was doing good. I just kept pushing the urge down. One day, the last day, I turned and walked towards him to double leg kick him off the roof, and at that last minute, I turned and went to the ladder and left for good. Without a job, me and my wife were in financial straits. I was too angry to work and too proud to beg. We had both lost our incomes. We had lost our house, our truck, our camper, and a Harley that I had, and we had to file for bankruptcy. It was at this point that we moved from Lawton to Tahlequah, my hometown. At this point, I was only at 70% disability. I was not at 100 yet through the VA. I still continued to try to find work, but it wasn't working. I still thought, I want to be normal. I want to do the things that I'm supposed to do after I get out of the military. I eventually started to give up on that. At my wit's end, I went to the VA and asked for a rate change on my PTSD. Since I wasn't working, I decided to try as hard as I could to get the medicine right so I could be normal again. This started the cycle of anti-anxiety medication. I have been on so many, probably all the anti-anxiety meds that there is. Each time I went on one, I did okay for about 3 to 4 weeks and then they would backfire. The first time I was inpatient in Muskogee VA Hospital, it was from a backfire of rage. Everything that I'd learned at Palo Alto seemed to be false because it came absolutely out of nowhere. I smashed and broke so much stuff, it did not make any sense. It happened so fast. I was scared of myself. I was willing to take anything. Again, 3 to 4 weeks later after the med change, I was in a dark depression. It was a short stay, and they changed my meds yet again and sent me home. At this point, I'd gotten my 100% disability and was trying to build a house. I had to fight with my wife over something stupid, a small issue really, and I threatened her and her mom if she tried to take all the money and run. She called my psychologist, and I was called into her office. I was given an option. Go inpatient the easy way, meaning right now with this VA security officer, or the hard way, meaning right now with the security officer, but first I fight him. And that's where I'll leave it for now. Until next time, never fight alone. Savage Rider, out. You've heard me say before that this foundation is funded by those who want us to live. I'm providing 3 QR codes to donate at Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Or you can donate at mightyoaks.org under the donation tab. I will link it in the bio. All donations made to these 3 accounts will go directly to Mighty Oaks Foundation.